Which transfers could end up being the most impactful for the LSU Tigers in 2024? And the first one could be one that you forgot about entirely.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, what's up, y'all? Welcome into Locked On LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and make sure to subscribe on YouTube as well. Just search Locked On LSU in that search bar, hit the subscribe button, and then you get notifications as soon as new episodes of the podcast drop. My name is Caroline Fenton, and I'm your host, as I am every single day. And today's edition of Locked On LSU is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little bit further? Have you ever wondered what adventure could be around the corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them out today at nissanusa.com. All right, let's get into it. LSU picked up a few pieces in the transfer portal this past offseason. I would expect more moves to be made in the spring window once that opens up in early to mid-April, around about spring game time. But as of right now, of the transfers that LSU has collected in the fall transfer portal window, which could prove to be the most impactful and which right now look to me to be some of the most important? First one might be a player that you completely forgot about entirely. First player is AJ Swann. AJ Swann, transfer quarterback from Vanderbilt. Now, when this move was first announced and first made, I know that this made splashes in LSU circles because we had talked about a lot on the podcast leading up to that, how LSU needed to get another quarterback in the room. And that was no disrespect whatsoever to the young 4 and 5-star quarterbacks that LSU already has in its quarterback room, whether it's a young Ricky Collins, so on and so forth. But LSU needed a more established and more experienced backup because you were just one Garrett Nussmeier injury away, rather, from a player who's only played a single snap in college football to be taking over the starting quarterback job. So I think AJ Swann could prove to be an incredibly impactful piece that LSU has picked up in the transfer portal. And look, if all things go well, you're not going to even see AJ Swann. And if you do, if all goes well, it would be incredibly sparingly. But why I think that this move is important, I think it's one of two things. First and foremost, having an experienced backup, having that, peace of mind is invaluable. Just ask Texas A&M. Last season, early in the season against Auburn, Connor Wigman, Texas A&M's starting quarterback last season, was an ankle injury, whatever it was, left him out for the entirety of the season. Max Johnson, who of course is a name and a player that we know and recognize very well, Max Johnson was their backup quarterback. Max Johnson, as we know, had a lot of SEC experience, of starting experience in this league. So when Connor Wigman went down, absolutely it was a hit to their team, and absolutely it was a disappointment to that fan base. But they could look at it and say, well, we trust Max Johnson. Now, what is AJ Swann under an offseason of being coached up by Joe Sloan and Brian Kelly and the rest of this offensive staff? I would expect at least improved, because what he showed at Vanderbilt this past season, frankly, was less than desirable. He's got a big arm. He's got the athleticism. He's got the size, 6'3", 230, but he has a tendency to turn the football over. 12 touchdowns, 7 interceptions last season, and 6 or 7 games of work for the Vanderbilt Commodores. So it's raw, and there is a lot to be refined, and there's a lot to be worked on. But we have seen a player like Garrett Nussmeier, who is maybe a little bit more turnover prone, get refined under Joe Sloan's coaching. So is AJ Swann a starting caliber quarterback in the Southeastern Conference? Frankly, I don't know if I really know the answer to that question at this point, but I lean no. Because if he was a starting quarterback in the Southeastern Conference, he probably would be a starting quarterback in the Southeastern Conference, but he came into LSU and they're going to be competing for the job as they should, because I think a quarterback competition is healthy. And I think a quarterback competition is good for every player involved. But overall, Garrett Nussmeier is going to be the starting quarterback, and we know that. But having an experienced starter that you can turn to and say, we need you to go out there, and he's not going to be, peeing down his leg, that's going to be important. Do I expect Garrett Nussmeier to get benched? Absolutely not. But this is football. Injuries happen, things happen. And you need a reliable backup that you can turn to and say, we need you to just take care of the football. We need you to just not to turn the football over, just hand it off, just get it into the hands of the players that can make plays and that you trust. And I think in an off season, with his coaching staff, combined with his experience, with SEC experience, I think is going to be invaluable for this team. Now, again, best case scenario, you don't even see AJ Swan. But let's be real. I think that there is going to be a point where you might need AJ Swan to go in there. No, I think there's absolutely going to be opportunities for AJ Swan to see the field if and when LSU goes up 3 or 4 scores in the second half against some of the lighter teams on their schedule. But we saw it several times this past season with Jaden Daniels. I think about Missouri. That game sticks out in my mind. The Jaden Daniels came out with a rib bruise, a bone bruise, or a rib fracture, whatever it was against Missouri. Garrett Nussmeier had to come in for a series or two. And no, Garrett Nussmeier didn't have to win you the game because Jaden Daniels and all of his just freaking Superman toughness came back out and was able to finish out the game. But there might become a time when AJ Swan has to do that. Hey, go out there, fill in for a couple series, take care of the ball, and just execute the offense like we've coached you to do. All right, I want to continue on the offensive side of the ball. A couple of players, or a player, or just a position group in general that I think is going to be so incredibly key that LSU brought in via the transfer portal in the offseason that could very much so pay dividends. We'll get into that coming up next after just a few words from our sponsors. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every single game of the tournament. Whether you're betting big on a big upset or a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's right, $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. And all you have to do is just place a $5 bet and win that bet. You have $200 to spend on what I think is the best betting month of the year because, of course, March Madness is upon us. So just visit fanduel.com/locked on and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Again, that is fanduel.com/locked on. FanDuel.com/LOCKEDON. FanDuel.com/locked on. All right, I also want to tell you about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. That's what brings home the winning trophy. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. They've got superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your #1 ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every single time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts that you need at the prices that you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, rolling along here, Locked On LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And hey, mark your calendar for the Locked On College Basketball Bracket Breakdown Show on Monday, March 18th at 7 a.m. Experts Andy Patton and Isaac Shade will break down their brackets and discuss everything that you need to know to fill out a winning bracket and prepare for this year's NCAA tournament. Find the Locked On Bracket Breakdown on Monday, March 18th on the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. All right, rolling along here, Locked On LSU, who I think could be the most impactful transfers for LSU in this upcoming season. First and foremost, it's AJ Swan, having a reliable backup that you can count on that has experience. And what AJ Swan turns into, we'll see. I don't think that he's going to be your quarterback of the future necessarily, but he'll be a reliable backup. I think that's the ceiling. I think that's what we can all hope for. But sticking offensively, the wide receiver position is one that I think is incredibly intriguing for LSU because there's not a ton of proven elite number one playmakers at the SEC level. I mean, Kyron Lacey and Chris Hilton, the familiarity that's there, but neither of those two have played that number one or even number two roles on a more consistent basis. Maybe Kyron Lacey felt like your number two for a handful of games this past season, but really for the most part, Kyron Lacey and Chris Hilton have been supplementary to, or were supplementary to Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. So they have the experience, but there's several other players that don't have the experience, whether it's a Shelton Sampson in that 2023 recruiting class, so on and so forth. So unproven, and also unproven and inexperienced in the wide receiver room. So I think that one of the two, either CJ Daniels or Xavion Thomas, CJ Daniels, the transfer from Liberty, or Xavion Thomas, the transfer from Mississippi State, one of those two, if not both, frankly, could prove to be incredibly impactful for this LSU team coming up in the 2024 season. If I had to choose, I would say it would probably be CJ Daniels. Everything that I have heard about CJ Daniels, everything that I've seen from CJ Daniels since he committed to LSU and since spring practice has kicked off, it has been overwhelmingly positive about CJ Daniels' speed, size, athleticism, just his ability as a receiver. And also what's up here in his head and what's down here in his heart. That he is determined to be successful. And I know that might sound clear and obvious, but unfortunately, you see a lot of times guys that are really good, but maybe just don't love ball. Maybe just don't have that dog in them. Everything I've heard about CJ Daniels is he has got that dog. And one thing that we do know about Brian Kelly, whether it's freshmen, whether it's transfers, but inexperienced or unproven players, specifically in their first year, Brian Kelly makes them earn it. That's one thing that I love about Brian Kelly. We saw it last year with Denver Harris. Look, I don't care how many stars are next to your name. I don't care how good you are. If you want to be a starter on this team, you have to earn your place. Denver Harris didn't earn his place. Denver Harris is no longer at LSU for a reason. I like that about Brian Kelly because you should have to earn it because this is LS freaking you, okay? Nothing is handed to you at this school, in this league, and at this level. I don't think CJ Daniels is any different. I think CJ Daniels is also being asked to prove himself as a starter, to prove himself to Garrett Nussmeier. That's an intimidating task. It's an intimidating task going from where he was at Liberty to now where he is at LSU. The increase in competition, the raising of the stakes. Now, look, Liberty was a fantastic football program, but now you're in the SEC. This isn't Group of Five anymore. It's also intimidating, I'm sure, to be walking into a receiver room with two guys that have been there, two guys that have built rapport with the quarterback. You're starting from, you're starting from scratch. You're starting from the very beginning. So if CJ Daniels is being asked to earn it and he carves out a role for himself, then you know what? He's earned it. And I think in a receiver room that feels kind of wide open, doesn't it? It feels like the receiver room is at a point where it's you want it, come and take it. You want the trust of the quarterback? Earn it. Work for it. You want the targets? Work for it. And it is wide open and it could be anyone's for the taking. I looked at last season a little bit differently, right? because we knew that one of that the number one receiver slot was going to Malik Neighbors. And the question was, well, who is the Robin to Malik Neighbors' Batman? It's not the case this year. I believe that Kyron Lacey very much so would be the leader in the clubhouse to be that guy that already has that role. But I don't even think that is earned either. So I lean CJ Daniels when we're talking about most impactful transfer at the wide receiver position. But make no mistake about it. I think that Xavier Thomas could be huge for this offense, depending on what his role is. Frankly, I just have a lot of questions about what Xavier Thomas really truly can be. 500 yards last year at Mississippi State, 1 touchdown. Longest reception was 11 yards. 40 receptions for 503 yards. Not stats or numbers that necessarily jump off the page. Is that because of Xavier Thomas and his ability, or is that because Mississippi State's offense was horrible last year? I'll give him the BOD and I'll lean toward the latter. So CJ Daniels is the one that's coming in with more eye-popping stats, over 1,000 yards at Liberty last year. But also, let's keep in mind, he was in a much more pass-happy, and let's be frank, a much more competent offense than what Mississippi State had last season. Xavier Thomas transfers into LSU. He is a Louisiana kid. Now, I don't know if he grew up an LSU fan or not. I don't know if he was one of those kids that said, man, I want to play for LSU no matter what. And he just found himself at Mississippi State. I don't know. Frankly, I don't. But I'm sure it's got to feel good to be back home. And I'm sure that he wants to prove himself in that role, especially back in the hometown team. So I think it'll be one of the two, CJ Daniels or Xavier Thomas, or frankly, both. Why not both? Like I said, this room and these roles are wide open for the taking. This offense is going to be fun. Very fun to watch unfold. Frankly, because I think there's a lot of unexpected. What we do expect is the run game will be different. What we do expect is to throw the ball a lot, to put up a lot of points, and to have very just eye-popping numbers. But how you get there and what it looks like and who fills into the certain roles, specifically who fits into the certain roles in the passing game, now that is going to be fun to watch unfold. All right, coming up next, I want to get into the defensive side of the ball. Who needs to step up? Who needs to be the most impactful transfer portal player for this LSU team on the defensive side of the ball? Because man, oh man, do they need some help and do they need some depth desperately? We'll get into that coming up next after just a few words from our sponsors. All right, I want to tell you about Amazon Fire TV. So, Fire TV is such a great option for you to get live TV without having cable or to get really great viewing experiences. It's your destination for sports. They've got live games, highlights, in depth analysis. Plus, they offer amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs as well as the Amazon Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. So don't worry if you don't have a smart TV, just plug that Fire Stick right into your existing TV and you will get access to millions of things. You've got opening weekend for baseball. You got the college basketball tournament. Conference tournaments are going down right now as well. You're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. So Fire TV channels lets you dive into all of the game analysis, highlights, and so much more to keep up to date on all of the latest in the world of sports. March Madness, NBA, MLB, and so much more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, and gaming and travel, cooking videos, whatever your interests are, sports or non-sports, they've got it. So check it out at Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. And if you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/lockedonfiretv. That is amazon.com/lockedonfiretv. All right, I also want to tell you about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. That's what brings home the winning trophy It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. They've got superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every single time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts that you need at the prices that you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, rolling along here, locked on LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Talking transfer portal. Who needs to step up? Who do I expect to be the most impactful players out of the transfer portal this upcoming season? First and foremost, it's AJ Swan. I think that's an underrated pickup that the LSU Tigers had in the transfer portal because I know it's not sexy to talk about backup quarterback, but if and when that day comes that you need that backup quarterback, it's nice to have one in hand that you can trust. So AJ Swan, and then talking transfer receivers. I think it's CJ Daniels or Xavier Thomas, and I truly think it could be one of the two. I'm going to go ahead and lean CJ Daniels just because he already has the proven track record and proven sample size to be a 1,000-yard plus receiver. With Xavier Thomas, we'll see what he looks like in a much more pass happy offense than what he had at Mississippi State. But I want to touch on the defensive side of the ball. We know that right now defensive depth is not a strong suit of this LSU football team. The cornerback position, yeah, you have bodies, but it's a lot unproven. Defensive end, I think you can feel okay about. Linebacker, I think you can feel okay about. But D tackle, you lose Mekhi Wingo and you lose Mason Smith. There's no automatic plug and play guy on the roster that you can look at and say, okay, yeah, it's fine. Losing Mekhi Wingo and Mason Smith, both who have first round talent, won't be first round picks, but I think are first round talent. You don't have a guy to kind of fill in there. That puts you in a vulnerable position when we all know and understand how important that D tackle position is, how important winning battles in the trenches is in this league. So I think it has to be Sean Washington. I think that has to be your most impactful transfer portal player defensively. And it's not even what I expect. I think it's what it needs to happen for this LSU defense to take any sort of steps forward. Now, it's tough, right? Because on the personnel side of things, player talent, you don't feel as great as you did last season. But a new coaching staff could give you reason for optimism. So can Bo Davis, can Blake Baker, and the rest of this defensive coaching staff coach up these players that haven't proven a lot? Yeah, absolutely. But to what point? What's the ceiling? I think Sean Washington has to be that guy that we're not necessarily counting on right now. But once we get a few weeks into the season, we say, no, that is absolutely a guy that you can count on. That's a guy that can make plays. I mean, look, he's got the size, 6'4", 300 pounds. He's a former Georgia commit that just elected to go to JUCO for 2 years. I think that we might look at, maybe this is just me, maybe I'm guilty of that. You look at a JUCO transfer, you might not look at JUCO transfers in the same regard as possibly transfers from other Power 5 schools or even Group of 5 schools. But Sean Washington at the JUCO level got a lot of experience. And yeah, the competition level is ramping up times 10, ramping up times 50. The expectation level is ramping up as well. But he at least has 2 full JUCO years of playing, a lot of snaps and doing that consistently. So you've got the experience, you've got the raw size and sheer talent, and we know that talent exists because he committed to Georgia out of high school. Not just any Joe Schmo gets an offer from the University of Georgia, especially on the defensive line. We saw how that Georgia defensive line has been an NFL factory the last few years. So now it's can you get to that next level? Can you take your sheer God given ability, refine it, and elevate it to be an impactful playmaker in the SEC? That's where Bo Davis makes his money. That is where Blake Baker makes his money, is taking the roster that you have. And defensively, I don't think it's fair to say depleted because you still have bodies there. Unproven, I think, is the fair word and probably the nicest word I could use. Unproven personnel and unproven pieces that these coaches have to work with, specifically on the defensive line and specifically at the defensive tackle position. But I'm looking at Sean Washington and saying, okay, how much more can you do than what you've done at the JUCO level? How much more can you step up? You're not going to fill holes left by Mekhi Wingo and Mason Smith. You're just not, because that's what kind of players those players were. But can you fill in with a playmaker? Can you fill in with a solid guy that you can count on? I don't need you to be Mason Smith. I don't need you to be Mekhi Wingo. I just need you to make plays. I need you to get to the quarterback. I need you to make life hell for opposing offenses. I know it's easy to say that's all I ask. Might be asking a lot, but hey, this is LSU. Got high expectations around here. All right, that's going to do it for us today. Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, continuing the spring football conversation on tomorrow's edition of Locked On LSU.